Okay. Nope. All right, so we're working on lesson 2.4, absolute value equations. And if you remember from our lesson, when we discussed absolute value, we were reviewing that. Anything within the absolute value symbol has to come out positive. It will never come out negative because absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line. And what we're actually trying to do in this lesson is determine a value inside the absolute value symbol that would make the equation true. So when you are looking at this, we're trying to find the possible outcomes or the possible values for X that would give us a positive 7. Okay, so what would have to be in that absolute value symbol so that we get a positive 7? Anyone know? Yeah.
A -7?
It could be a -7, yes. So X can equal a -7. What else can it be? How about a positive 7? The absolute value of 7 is a positive 7. So it could be negative and it could be positive. And the way, if your numbers end up being the same, you could write it as X equals plus or minus 7. Okay, so that could be how you would write your final answer. Okay. Is there anything inside of the absolute value symbol that could result in a -7? Can anything in absolute value equal a negative? It can. No, it can't. So anytime you are left with an absolute value symbol all by itself, and it's set equal to a negative, then that means there's no solution because no number inside of an absolute value symbol will come out negative. So in this case, we would write no solution. Okay. All right, so now we're going to start getting into how to solve absolute value equations to determine the value of X. So when you are solving these, you're going to isolate the absolute value on one side of the equation using the addition and multiplication properties of equality. Now, and these down here, because we don't have an addition or a subtraction outside of the absolute value, we can skip that step. When we get further on, you'll this will make a little bit more sense. So we're going to step 2, we're going to form 2 separate equations for this absolute value problem. We're going to set it equal to a positive, and then we're going to set it equal to a negative. So let me show you what that looks like. We're going to have X plus 3 equals a positive 5. And then we're going to set up a second one, X plus 3 equals a negative 5. So that when we solve for X, we're going to have every possibility that X can be inside of this absolute value symbol to make this equation true. So now we just solve both of these equations. We're going to subtract 3 on both sides, on both of them. Okay. And then here we get X equals 2. And over here we get X equals -8. And what this is saying is that X inside of the absolute value symbol right here could be a 2. And X inside of this absolute value here could be a -8. So we can check here to make sure our answer is true. Now I want you to check on this one. You don't have to check on your homework unless maybe you think you might have the wrong answer. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this absolute value equation and we're going to plug 2 where the X is. We're going to substitute that in. And we're going to see if 2 is in fact a possible solution. 2 plus 3 is 5. And the absolute value of 5 is 5. So this does check out. 2 is a solution. Now, at first glance, when we go to check at -8, we might think, oh, no, that's not a possible solution, but let's go ahead and check that to see. So we're going to rewrite our equation out and we're going to plug -8 into the x. So we're going to substitute the value. And then we're going to solve it. So we have -8 plus 3 gives us a -5. And the absolute value of -5 is 5. So -8 is a solution because 5 equals 5. So these two right here are our possible solutions for x inside of that absolute value equation. So are there any questions? All right. So when you set up the next one, the practice one, you're going to set this up equal to a +10 and a -10. So I want you to go ahead and do that right now. And then I want you to solve for the possible values of x inside of that absolute value equation. And then when you're finished, you can check your answer up here. And if you just want to maybe try working this out, you can check your answer with your calculator or whatever, but we have 17 minus 7 is 10, and the absolute value of 10 is 10. -3 minus 7 is a -10, and the absolute value of -10 is 10. So those are our two possible values for x. Okay. All right, let's go to page 2. All the problems on this page are the same. Yes.
So for practice 1, when x minus 7 equals +10, why did we turn the 10 into a negative?
Because there are multiple, the absolute value solution, so the solution inside of the absolute value can be a positive and it can be a negative. And so when you set these equal to a positive and negative, you're getting both solutions. Now it can't, look at number 5, example 5 on the back. Now, an absolute value equation can't equal a negative, but a regular equation can. So is there a solution to this? No, there's not, because nothing inside of that absolute value can be negative. So you would write no solution here. Okay. All right. That was a good question. Okay, so again, the rest of these equations have the same process. You're going to set them equal to a positive and a negative. So I'm going to do examples 2, 3, and 4 with you. We've already done 5, and then I'm going to have you do the right side on your own. So 3, the absolute value of 3x, we're going to set it up as 3x equals a +2 and 3x equals a -2. Okay. And then you're just going to solve these. So we will divide both sides by 3 on both equations. So that x equals 2/3 and x equals -2/3. Okay, so it's both of those. All right, let's go down to example 3. We're going to set this one up as 4/5 x equals 8 and 4/5 x equals a -8. And then you solve this like normal. I will say when I was grading 2.2, a lot of students were getting the equations set up like this, mixed up with clearing fractions. And so I want to make something clear. You typically do not want to clear fractions unless there's more than one. So if it's something like example 3, you're not going to clear them. But what will you do to solve for x here? Yes.
Well, do this.
Right, you're gonna multiply by the reciprocal on both sides, so. Multiply by 5/4. Multiply by 5/4. And the same thing over here. Okay, so these cancel out and just become an x, or 1x really. And the same thing over here. And then, of course, if you cross simplify, I would go ahead and do that. If you don't, just make sure that you simplify your fractions when you're done. Okay. So your final answer should be x equals plus and minus 10. Those are your possible solutions for x. All right, yes.
I have a question about, are you going to turn the -4 to a +4?
No. So that's a good question. Whatever is on the absolute value side of the equation, you leave just like it is. The only thing that you will be turning into a positive or negative would be the 2. Okay, so this one would be 3x minus 4 equals a positive 2. And 3x minus 4 equals a negative 2. Okay, and then that's how you would solve it. So this is now a 2-step equation. All right, so we're going to add 4 to both sides. You could check that step if you want, and then you have to divide both sides by 3. Okay, are there any questions on how to do this? Okay, I want you to go ahead and do the right side on your own, and then we will come back and check this. Same goes for those of you who are watching. Go ahead and solve the right. I'm going to pause the video, and then when we come back, we'll check our answers. Okay, go ahead and check practice 2 and 3. And if you have any questions, let me know. If you got one of your answers wrong, go back and check. And then check my work. Who knows, I could have made a mistake too. And I'll know that. Okay, and then here is 4 and 5. Remember, 5 would be no solution because you can't have an absolute value. Did I mess up?
3, yeah.
3 times 6.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Oh, look, this is an easy fix. 18. Oh, wait, that one isn't. See? So glad I have observance students. Okay, and then this would be negative 18. Thank you. All right, and then let's go down here. All right. All right, let's go ahead and move on to page 3. Okay, I want you to do examples. I want you to go ahead and do example and practice 6. I put these in here because the negative might throw you off a bit, but it is still the same. The time that you want to pay attention to the negative is if the 9 would have been negative. So here, we're just going to set this up as negative x plus 3 equals 9. and negative x plus 3 equals a negative 9. Okay, so you're just gonna solve those like normal. And you end up with a negative x. Can we have a negative x in our answer? No, it's like having a negative 1x or negative 2x. You're going to divide by that negative number. You want your variable answer to, or your answer to have a positive variable. So I'm just going to divide both sides by a negative 1. And that gets rid of our negative. Okay. So x is negative 6 and x is 12. One other common error I'm finding is that when you have a negative on the top and bottom, sometimes I'll see that the answer is negative when it should be positive, right? You'll write down a negative answer. So just make sure if there's 2 negatives, you're going to make that a positive when you're multiplying and dividing. Okay, I want you to do practice 6. Don't try the bottom ones because there's something a little different about those bottom ones. Okay. And try to do this on your own without looking up here while I'm working them out, and then check. It's okay if we make mistakes. I do it all the time and then I learn from them. My stomach is growling up here. Can anyone hear it? Maybe the video people can hear it. Okay. Okay. Check your answer, check my answer. Okay.
You distribute, so.
No, I'm gonna go over those right now. I see a few people finishing up these. So I want to make sure that everyone is ready to listen to what I have to say before we move on to the next, because we are not going to distribute. The absolute value symbol is not a parentheses. So we do not distribute. One thing that you need to know though, is that you need to get everything away from the absolute value symbol before you set up your 2 equations. Okay, and so the first step right here on page 1, it says isolate the absolute value on one side of the equation using the addition and multiplication properties of equality. Move everything else to the other side of the equation. So what that means is that I'm going to use the multiplication property of equality here to get rid of my 2. I don't want that there. And when we get to the next page, there's going to be a plus or a minus next to the absolute value. We want to get rid of that. So this is how you're going to do this. Does anyone know what we might do to get rid of that 2? Yeah. Yeah, we're going to divide both sides by 2. And the only thing you're dividing by 2 is the 2. You're not dividing the x by 2. You're not dividing the 4 by 2. Those stay in the absolute value symbol. So we're dividing just the 2 by 2. Now what I have is the absolute value of x plus 4 equals 4. Now I've gotten rid of everything around my absolute value symbol and I can set up my 2 equations and solve. So I have x plus 4 equals 4 and x plus 4 equals a negative 4. And now I solve. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And yes, you can have a solution of 0. So if I put 0 into where x is, 0 plus 4 is the absolute value of 4, the absolute value of 4 is 4. So. All right. Let's do example 8. Notice on this one, it equals a -12. But look what happens when we divide both sides by this -2. Yeah, it's going to equal a +6. So what you must do is you must get rid of all terms around the absolute value symbol before you start solving, or before you determine that there is no solution to the equation. Okay. So now we're going to set up our 2 equations. And we're going to solve this. Oh. Once you check this answer, I want you to do practice 7 and 8 on your own, and then we will come back and check those. Okay, go ahead and check practice 7 and 8. Are there any questions? Okay, on page 4, I'm going to do all the left side. And then I'll have you do the right side on your own. And hopefully we'll be able to finish this before time is up. So remember, on the other side, I said you have to get rid of everything around your absolute value. So that means we have to get rid of the 2 and the -3. And if you remember with equations, you always get rid of your addition and subtraction before you do your multiplication and division. So we want to use the addition property of equality first by adding 3 to both sides. Here. So that's your first step. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite this as 2 times the absolute value of x plus 1 equals 10.
Why don't we use the addition property first?
Because when you're solving equations, you use reverse order of operations. So when you're using order of operations, you go in order using that method. But then in order to figure out what x is, you have to go backwards. Yeah. All right, next, we're going to divide both sides by 2. Okay, and I'm going to rewrite this again. Okay. And now we can set up our 2 equations and solve for x. Don't forget to set one up to positive and one up to a negative. Okay, so go ahead and check your answer. And then we're going to move on to example 10. Notice example 10 does not have a coefficient in front of the absolute value. So in this case, we're just going to subtract 5 on both sides. Okay, that's what we're going to start with. So we're gonna subtract 5, subtract 5. And we end up with 2x minus 3 equals a negative 1. Okay. So what's our next step?
Absolute value.
Mhm. So, well, once we get to this point, like what would we do next? What do you notice here? Yeah.
We would add the 3. Right?
Okay, remember, we can't do that yet.
Oh,
Okay, that's okay.
there's no solution
Why?
because it's -1.
Yes, it's -1. Once we get rid of everything around the absolute value symbol, then we start solving. But we can't solve it if the absolute value symbol is isolated, but it equals a negative number. So in this case, it's no solution. Now, some of you may end up solving it, forgetting that, oh, that's a negative, or not forgetting, but not realizing, oh, that's a negative, I can't solve it. So just be very careful with that. You will still get credit on your homework for solving it correctly, but points will be deducted if you don't recognize that there's no solution. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to example 11. Example 11, we're going to start by adding 5 to both sides. And then we divide by 3. And we have. Now this one's simple. Because there's no really solving the equation, it's x equals +4 and x equals -4. So we really don't have to do anything else with that. We know what x is. All right, let's go to example 12. We're going to start by adding 4 to both sides. And we end up with the negative absolute value of x equals 6. Now that negative in front of the absolute value symbol stands for a -1, right? So now what we have to do is we have to divide both sides by a -1. So what would our answer be for this one?
Also no solution.
Also no solution. You can't have an absolute value equal a negative number. And the example for that one was on the front right here. We have an absolute value equaling a negative. That's very similar to this one. So no solution. Okay, so what I would like for you to do right now is do 9 through 12 practice, and then we will come back and check our answers. Okay, and that goes for those watching. All right, go ahead and check 9 and 10. Okay. And then here is 11 and 12. Are there any questions from anyone? All right. That concludes our lesson for 2.4 absolute value equations.